Kakalosh Masechet Pesahim Sadivav 96a Mishnah Matnitim. It's a few lines down over there, and it says over here like this: Ma ben Pesach Mitzrayim le Pesach Dorot. What's the differentiation between the Korban Pesach which Bnei Yisrael brought to Mitzrayim when they went out on that night of Pesach, and between Pesach which is brought every single day throughout generations, every single year throughout generations? So it says over here, Pesach Mitzrayim, right? The Pesach Mitzrayim Mikacho Mibeasor. They actually bought it or they purchased it from the 10th of Nisan. The Taun Hazah, and they have to sprinkle it, which means they have to lazot b'agudat ezov with this agudat ezov with a hyssop, a bundle. V'ala mashkov al shetem mezuzot, and where they sprinkle it on the top post and the doorpost, the two doorposts. V'neichal b'chipazon, you have to eat it, right? Bivhilu. What is bivhilu? Quickly.
It's a word that
yeah. Belayla echad. Yeah. So he says, yeah, it's eaten quickly. In one night. The Pesach Dorot are noheg all the 7 days. So he says, obviously, the Kavanah is not the Korban Pesach, the Kavanah is going to explain what does that mean, because obviously we know that it's not 7 days you could eat the Korban Pesach, even later on. Says the Gemara, yeah, Menalan. How do we know this? Which means the first chiluk of the Mishnah, the Pesach Mitzrayim was taken on the 10th of the month, right? And not Pesach Dorot. Menalan, how do we know this? So says the Gemara, Dichtiv, it says in the Pasuk, Tabrul kol adat yiseh lemor, be'asor lachodesh hazeh, v'ikhu, right? What does that mean? He'd speak to the congregation of Israel and tell them that on the 10th of this month, they're going to take a seh. So when it says, be'asor lachodesh hazeh, just say be'asor lachodesh yichu. Why does it have to say be'asor lachodesh hazeh? Ze mikacho be'asor, ben Pesach Torot mikacho be'asor. This is the only time when the Korban Pesach is mi'asor, and not Pesach Torot shemikacho be'asor. Okay? Very good. Next. Ela me'ata. So now we're going to ask the following question. Vayalachem lishmeret adar ba'asar yom lechodesh zeh. 1 second. If it says that this is going to be a mishmeret for you until the 14th of this day, right? Now it says arba asar yom lachodesh hazeh. Hachanami, are you going to tell me now that the word hazeh is extra? V'zeh taum bikur arba yamim kol shchita ve'en acher taum bikur. And what, only this one needs the 4 days of bikur and not the other one? Which means, one more time, what are we trying to bring here? We're trying to bring a differentiation between Pesach Ledorot and Pesach Mitzrayim. Pesach Mitzrayim, they took it on the 10th of the month. Pesach Ledorot, they didn't need to. How did they learn that from? From the fact that it's written Hazeh. The word Hazeh was extra, so therefore only on the Pesach Mitzrayim did they need the 4 days beforehand. So ask the Gemara, I don't understand you. When it says that you have to make a mishmeret, which means you have to come and you have to actually check an animal. Every animal, if you remember, we spoke about this a million times. Ashkenazim minimum do selichot 4 days before Rosh Hashanah. Why do they do 4 days before Rosh Hashanah? Explains the Mishnah in the name of the Acharonim. Very simple. Just like when you bring an animal, you need to do bikur 4 days, which means when you bring an animal as a sacrifice, you have to check the animal 4 days to make sure there's no blemishes. So too, when we are bringing ourselves in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Rosh Hashanah, we need minimum of 4 days to make sure that we don't have any blemishes. Okay, so now, what he's asking is now what? You're going to tell me now that only the Korban Pesach of Pesach, right? Meaning that the one they did when they came out of Mitzrayim, that's the only one that needs bikur, that needs to check that the animal has no blemish for 4 days, and every other one no? How could that be? Vatanya, we learned in a Braita. Ben Bagbag, yeah, Ben Bagbag Omer, Minayin letamid shetaun bikur arba yamim kodem shechita. How do we know that the Korban Tamid needs, right, taun 4 days right before also now the Korban Tamid? So he says before the shechita, shneimar tishmeru lakrivli bemoado, tishmeru lakrivli bemoado, tishmeru. How do you have to be shomer? Ulhalon omer, and another place it says to do with the Korban Pesach, vayalachem lemishmeret. So tishmeru mishmeret is the same thing, adar ba'asar. So minashon shmira. So therefore, since it says tishmeru mishmeret, male halan, just like over there by the Korban Pesach Mitzrayim, taum bikur arba yamim kol shechita, you need the checking 4 days before shechita. Afkan taum bikur arba yamim kol shechita. So to here you need the 4 days before shechita. So it comes out that ledorot korban tamid tzarich bikur. As for sure, also Pesach dorot needs bikur. So what are you telling me? You told me that keilu, that you don't need bikur for the 4 days, because that was one of the differentiations between Pesach Ledorot and Pesach for the one Pesach Mitzrayim. It's not true. Answers the Gemara. Shane hatam. It's different over there to do with tichtiv tishmeru. When it says by the korban tamid tishmeru, right? Pesach Dorot nami aktiv avatat avodot b'chodesh zeh. Shiu kol avodot b'chodesh zeh. That all the avodot are going to be in this month. What does that mean? Just like it was done during Mitzrayim. He says no. The word hazeh is coming to actually exclude the Pesach Sheni, which means that the Pesach Sheni, which is going to be on the 14th of Iyar, right? That somebody that did not bring it on the 14th of Nisan, it's going to come to exclude a Michyu Bikur, right? And therefore, that's why they make the drasha from the word hazeh to tell you that since Pesach Sheni is domeh to Pesach Mitzrayim, that it's only a yom echad. So the mute is that by Pesach Mitzrayim it's coming to be ma'et domeh le Pesach Mitzrayim. Shlivot din shenoheg be Pesach Mitzrayim. So here it says Ra'ui lomar lesikum. It says over here, right? We're going to do a summary. So the footnote says the summary is the Gemara is doreshet that all the Pesachim which are brought down in Chodesh Nisan or any type of a korban tamid, they need bikur 4 days. Hamilah hazeh, the word hazeh, which is in the pasuk Vayalem Mishmeret Lachem Mishmeret Yom Pesach Yom Chodesh hazeh, is not taking out the chiyuv of bikur only by Pesach Sheni. Okay. Now it says, but by other korbanot, yes. Okay. So now he says over here, right? But you don't have to do it, but that's mikro b'yisor, which means even though you have to do bikur 4 days, you don't have to designate it from the 10th. And that was the difference between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach Ledorot. Okay, fine. So says the Gemara, what? Yeah, Ela me'ata. So now we're going to ask the following question. It says the concept of the mute of the hazeh. When it says the word hazeh, okay, remember there was written by Pesach Mitzrayim, Otzi Pesachim Achirim Miklal Halacha Nidona. So dichtiv it says ve'achlut basar balayla hazeh. You have to eat the meat on this night. Balayla hazeh. Hachanami, are you going to tell me that it's the same thing? Hazeh is only a zeh nechal balayla ve'en acher nechal balayla, which means that for sure that's not correct, because we know the Pesach Torot is also going to be eaten in the night times. So if you're going to tell me the word hazeh is extra, what is it coming to exclude? Yeah, so he says, Tamarka, the Gemara answers again, no. The pasuk says, "Ve'avatai ta'avodah azot b'chodesh hazeh." That comes to teach you that all avodah of Pesach, which is done in Nisan, is always going to be like Pesach Mitzrayim, which means whatever's in Nisan is always going to be like Pesach Mitzrayim. Ela hazeh lamali. So what do I have the word hazeh? Who led Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva? It's like Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva. Why? It says over here in the footnote, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Akiva are brought down in Kuf Yutet Mubet, right? And the Gemara Berachot Taftet Amud Aleph. Dorshim kol echad mehem din acher min hapasuk balayla hazeh. Elazar ben Azariah learns from the Layla hazeh shapesach ne'echal rak ad chatzot, and Rabbi Akiva lomen shapesach ne'echal rak lelayla echad, right? Which means only one night. So that means basically the machloket is going to be, is it until chatzot or until the entire night time? And that's what they learn from the word hazeh. Okay, fine. So says the Gemara, Ela me'ata, another question. Tichtiv v'chol harei lo yochal bo. When it says any person that's uncircumcised, he's not allowed to eat it. Hachanami, are you going to tell me now that the word, when it says bo, right, the bo is coming to exclude the bo and ochel el ochel, which means only a person that doesn't have circumcision, he cannot eat the korban pesach of Mitzrayim, but he could eat the korban pesach of Dorot. So says the pasuk, no, again, Amarka ve'avata et avodah azot. When it says the word of ve'avata, all the avodot of Pesach are the same, whether it was of Nisan or of Pesach Mitzrayim. Ela bo lamali. So why do I have the word bo? Bo en ochel, aval ochel b'matzah u'maror, which means that a person that does not have a brit milah, he's not allowed to eat the korban pesach, but he is allowed to eat matzah u'maror, which means matzah u'maror. Huh? What's a machloket? לא הבנתי כלום. Yeah. No, we're not talking about. We're talking about somebody that does not have a brit milah at all. Nothing to do with somebody that does not have a brit milah is not able to do the korban pesach. However, though, even though by the korban pesach it impedes him the brit milah, and that's why it says bo en ochel, but he is allowed to eat matzah u'maror, which means you're allowed to give a goy or a person, even a Jew that does not have a brit milah, you're allowed to give him matzah u'maror. You're not allowed to give him korban pesach. So ela me'ata. So we're going to ask another question. Then it says kol ben nechal lo yochal bo. right? When it says that no stranger, which means no goy, could eat it. Hachanami de boenu eno ochel aval ochelu Pesach ledorot. Are you going to tell me that he cannot eat from the Pesach of Mitzrayim, but he could eat from the Pesach of Dorot? How could that be? So the Gemara says again, Amarka, no. It says ve'avata. Ve'avata means just like there's no difference between Pesach Mitzrayim and Pesach ledorot. That means the same halachot. That means just like Pesach Mitzrayim, a ben nechar, a goy cannot eat it. So too, Pesach ledorot, the same thing. So why do I have the word bo? Bo hamarat dat poselet ve'en hamarat dat poselet bitruma. Which means to do with the Korban Pesach, if a person comes and he's hemidat dato, hemidat dato means that he renounces his religion. You have a person that he renounces his religion, so it says hamarat dat is poselet from the person from eating the Korban Pesach. But hamarat dat is not posel legabe eating teruma. That means a kohen mumar is allowed to eat teruma. So you have a kohen that he's not religious; he's completely off. He's allowed to eat teruma, but he cannot eat the Korban Pesach. Because hamarat dat, right, is a problem to do with the Korban Pesach, but not to do with teruma. You needed to write also in the Torah, also about a goy, and also about a person, right, that did not do a brit milah. Why? Because if it was only going to be written arel, what does that mean? If it was only going to be written an arel, which is a person that doesn't have a brit milah mishum demais. Why? Because it's disgusting, which means the Torah koteve befirush that an arel is pasul. So I would have thought that the reason why is because gufo is maus. It's like his body is disgusting to us. Aval ben nechar, right? But a ben nechar, lo mais, which is not mais, meaning a goy is not mais. Emalo, I would say no, right? Why? Because a mumar shen gufo maus, I would say that he's not going to be pasul. Sricha, that's why I need both cases. That even a mumar is pasul milechol pesach. Ben Nechar, and if it was only going to be written the other side, which is Ben Nechar, which means if the Torah would have only told us that a Mumar is Pasul, I would have said that Mishum den Libola Shamayim, because he doesn't have his heart to heaven. Aval Arel di Libo Shamayim, but you have an Arel, that okay, fine, he doesn't have a Brit Milah, but it could be that he's the most God-fearing person, right? If you remember, we brought down, there does exist such a case where a person does not have a Brit Milah and he's permitted not to have a Brit Milah. What's the case? If Chazak Baruch. If two of his brothers died beforehand, there's a machlok, whether it's 2 or 3, whatever. But if 2 or 3 of the brothers, they died beforehand, so then the third boy, right, is patur from Brit Milah. Because it means that they have something in their blood that is very problematic, that if they have a Brit Milah, they die. So that's a concept brought down. So it could be, right, that you don't have, meaning, not the fact that he doesn't have a Brit Milah does not mean that he doesn't have Libol Shamayim. He's got Libol Shamayim. So Imalo, I would say that Be'emet, he's not going to be pasul. Tzricha, that's why the Torah had to tell you, that also an Arel also is not allowed to. So whether it's because Arel, because he doesn't have anything, or he doesn't have a Brit Milah, or even though he's religious, or a person which is a Ben Necha, which means he's a stranger, even though he does have a Brit Milah, either or is the same thing. Okay? It's very problematic. Pesach. Yeah, very problematic.
But you said the holiday is less strict than Shabbat.
Opposite.
Shabbat they live with her.
Opposite. Exact opposite. No, chas v'shalom. Katuv ba'alacha that on Shabbat you could have a goy. Yom Tov, you're not allowed to have a goy. Very simple reason. The simple reason is because on Shabbat you cannot cook. So therefore, if the goy is going to come for you, anyway, it doesn't matter. Well, you have cooked, you have cooked. Well, you don't have cooked, you don't have cooked. On Yom Tov, you're allowed to cook. If you cook for a goy, you're over on a lav doraita. Because you're only allowed to cook for a Jew. You're not allowed to cook for a goy. So if you have a goy coming to you, we suspect you're going to start cooking. You're not allowed to have a goy for Yom Tov.
All Yom Tov?
Which one? Any Yom Tov. Any Yom Tov.
Any Yom Tov. Not the holiday itself, not the first day.
Which one?
Not the first day though.
Nothing to do the first day, last day. Yom Tov, Yom Tov. The halachot of Yom Tov. בהלכות Yom Tov זה מפורש שולחן ערוך. שולחן ערוך מפורש בהלכות Yom Tov. שולחן ערוך מפורש. What? If you want, you can bring it to me. חלק ה', משנה ברורה. Well, again, you're already going to the mysticism. If you want to go to Kabbalah, There's tons of Kabbalah, right? Also, the Sukkah, he's not allowed to be in a Sukkah. He's not allowed in the night of Pesach. Yeah? If you go into the Kabbalah, there's a lot of things. But without the Kabbalah, talking about halakha, strict halakha, there's a problem. Mitzad Ilchot Yom Tov, right? And then I don't know what's I don't we אין לנו עסק בנסתרים. אני אומר לך מה שכתוב בהלכה. אלא מעתה, that which is written in, right, this is what now we're asking to do with Pesach Mitzrayim, to do with the two different sugim of Eved Ivri. Toshav v'sachir lo yochal bo. When it says Toshav v'sachir lo yochal bo, what does that mean? That a Toshav v'sachir is not allowed to eat from the Korban Pesach. Hachanami, I'm going to say that the word bo, hu and ochel, which means that basically the Eved Ivri is not going to be able to eat, but he could eat the Pesach Dorot, right? Which means the Korban Pesach, that he cannot eat, but he could eat the Pesach of Dorot. Now, okay, so now he says, no, again, I'm going to disprove this. Why? Because Amar Kra, it says in a Pasuk, yeah, the Gemara says, Amar Kra, it says in the Pasuk, the Gemara says, Ve'avata. What does it mean, Ve'avata? It's teaching that all the Avodot of Pesach, which is done in Nisan, Meshech Kol Adorot, is just like Pesach Mitzrayim. So what do I do then with the word Bo, Lamali? So he says, Bo, Ze Amarat Dad Posele, Ve'amarat Dad Posele Bitruma, the exact same thing what we answered before. When it says, Toshav v'sachir lo yochal bo, Hamarat Adat, if somebody is going to renounce their religion, it's going to disqualify them from eating, but it's not going to disqualify them from eating the Truma. It's only going to disqualify them from eating the Korban Pesach. So ask the Gemara, Ela me'ata, now we're going to ask another question. Umalta oto, so now what does it say over there? By Pesach Mitzrayim, du'am brit milah, and then he's allowed to eat it. Hachanami, so to here, the bo, eno ochel, avlo ochel b'zedura, so Mashra cannot eat it until he does the brit milah to his servants and his children. But he could eat Pesach Torot? Obviously not. Amar Krav Vavata. Again it says Vavata. Ela bo lamali. So why do I have the word bo? Bo ze milat zecharav. Va'avadav me'akevet. Ve'en milat zecharav avadav me'akevet bitruma. Which means not only does it impede, if he doesn't do the Brit Milah to his slaves, to his male slaves, right? What happens is, or to his male children, what happens is he cannot eat the Korban Pesach. Meaning, a person that does not do a Brit Milah to his own son or to his own servants cannot eat the Korban Pesach. But Milat Zecharav Avadav, but the Milah of his children, his boys, or his servants, they do not stop him from eating Truma. Meaning Truma is allowed to eat. It's only Korban Pesach he's not allowed to eat. So Ela Me'ata, so we're going to ask the following question. The Chtiv, it says, Ve'etzem lo yishbiru bo, right? Etzem lo tishbiru bo, hachanami, you're going to tell me, Tebo eno shover aval shover Pesach Dorot? What, he can't just break the one? So obviously the Gemara is going to answer the same question as always. Amar Krav Vavata. So bo lamali, why do I have the word bo? So it comes to teach you, bo is kasher, velo bePesach pasul. Only in a Pesach kasher is there an isur to break the etzem, but not in a Pesach pasul. So the Gemara continues. Ela me'ata, right? We learned this already to do with that if it's not kosher, so you can break the bones of the Korban Pesach. Ela me'ata, we're going to now ask the following question. It says in a pasuk, al tochlu mimenu, you're not allowed to eat it raw. Mimenu etacholna, you're not allowed to eat it raw, but you're allowed to eat Pesach raw? Obviously not. The Gemara says, Amar Krav Vavata, it says Vavata, it's all the same halachot. So ela mimenu, what does it mean al tochlu mimenu? Right? Lamali, why do I need that? So he says to answer like Rabba Amar Yitzchak, like to answer Rabba Yitzchak, that it says over here that he learned the Gzera Shava, which is connecting the Korban Pesach to Masechet Sheni. Right? That there it was also written the same word. So therefore from there we learned that the Pesach is not going to be eaten by an Arel. Also Masechet Sheni is not eaten by an Arel. Meaning Masechet Sheni cannot be eaten by somebody that does not have a Brit Milah. Remember Masechet Sheni is that which you take off the second 10% on the years 1, 2, 4, 5, and you have to eat it inside the walls of Jerusalem. Okay? Fine. Says in the two dots. You have to eat it bivhilu. You have to eat it very, very quickly. Yeah, mehera, bemirut. So how do we know that this is going to be a difference between the two different Korban Pesach? So he says, Te'amar krab, as it says in a pasuk, va'achaltem oto behipazon. You have to eat it quickly, hastenly. Oto nechal bechipazon. Only it, you have to eat it very, very quickly. Ve'nacher nechal bechipazon. When there's no other Korban Pesach, you have to eat it so quickly. Okay? Next, says the two dots. Upesach Torot noheg kol shiva. The Pesach Torot is going to be noheg all the 7 days. Amaikai. What are we talking about now? If you're going to talk about the Korban Pesach, what? There's a Korban Pesach for 7 days? We know that even throughout generations, there's no such thing as a Korban Pesach for 7 days. Sadik Vav Amubet. Ela chametz. No, we're talking about the Yisur of chametz. Mikado Pesach Mitzrayim Laila Echad. Mashman and Pesach Mitzrayim it was only asur to eat chametz one night. V'tulo and not anything else. V'tanya we learned in the Braita. Rabbi Yosef Leomer, Rabbi Yosef Le says, Minay Pesach Mitzrayim shein chimutzon oegalu yom echad. How do we know that it's only going to be for one day? Tamun Omar velo yachel chametz usamich yom mitzrayim. So therefore, they actually learn from there that's Mevuar Braita that the Yisur of Echilat Chametz on Pesach Mitzrayim was the entire day, velo belayla levad. It was only the entire day, not only during the night time. Elahachi kama, but this is what it means to say. Laila echad v'odin lePesach Dorot v'chimutzo kol hayom Pesach Dorot noy kol shiva, which means like this, right? To do with the entire concept that we just mentioned now, for sure it's still going to be talking about Laila echad, and the same halacha applies to Pesach Dorot. That is also going to be Laila echad. Okay, Mitsuyan. That means you could only eat it for one night, according to everybody, right? It doesn't matter whether it's Pesach Mitzrayim or Pesach Dorot. However, though, chimutzo, which means the yisur of eating chametz on Pesach Mitzrayim, was kol hayom. By Pesach Dorot, it was 7 days. Meaning, when we came out of Egypt, we were only prohibited to eat chametz one day, not for 7 days. Then it became 7 days. Okay. What?
Anyway, today is also the same. The right as a Rakim Echad. So it didn't change.
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
Chametz.
Yes.
Shiva Yamim.
No, it's written in the Torah 7 days. Yeah?
Okay, Shiva Yamim not Chametz.
Yeah? You're talking about the mitzvah of eating matzah. They're two different mitzvot. Okay? Fine. Amar Rabbi Yoshua, says the Mishnah. Mishnah on Tzadik Vav Mum Bet. Amar Rabbi Yoshua, says Rabbi Yoshua. Yeah, Shamati. I heard from my rabbis. Shetumurat Pesach, right? Kereva. Utmurat Pesach ena kreva. Ve'en li lefaresh. He said, I heard from my rabbis that there's such a thing as a Tmurat Pesach, which is going to be brought as a shlamim. Remember, Tmurah is like a substitute, yeah? That is going to be brought as a shlamim. And I heard about a Tmurah Pesach that's not going to be brought, right, as Beturat shlamim. Ve'en li lefaresh. But now I don't remember the case. Meaning I don't remember the case when it's brought or not brought. I'm going to be Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says, I'm going to explain it to you. Ha-Pesach shenimtza kodem shchitat Pesach. If you found the Korban Pesach before you actually did, meaning you found it before the shchitat of the Be'ema Machlifa for the Pesach, eno karevu atzmon l'shlamim. It's not going to be brought as a shlamim. Yireh ad she'istev. You have to wait until it has a blemish. V'imached, and then you sell it. V'yavi b'damav l'shlamim. Then you bring with the money a shlamim. V'chem b'tmurato, the same halacha would apply with its substitute. But the Pesach HaMekori, which was found after shchitat Pesach, karev l'shlamim is brought as a shlamim. V'chem tmurato. So it all depends before the shchita or after the shchita. If it was done before the shchita, which means that now you found this animal before the shchita, so then that's what we said over here. If it's going to be before the shchita, you wait until it grazes, gets a blemish, you redeem it, and now the money you come and you get a shlamim. But if it's going to be after the shchita, so now you bring it itself as a shlamim. Says the Gemara, Velema Pesach karev Pesach ena karev. Why did we say Shamati sheish tmurat Pesach kreva v'tmurat Pesach ena kreva? Just say Shamati sheish Pesach karev v'Pesach eno karev. Why do we talk about the tmurah right away? Right, which is a substitute. So says the Gemara, Hakamash Malan, this comes to teach you the Ika tmurat Pesach de lo kreva. There is a case of tmurat Pesach which is not brought on the mizbeach, right? And what is that? There is a case where it's not brought on the mizbeach. That's what we would have thought. I mean, there was a bigger chidush to mention the Tmurat Pesach because we would have thought to say that it's not going to be brought, and that's what we're saying that it is, because it's not going to be considered a Pesach Dahui, right? So he's saying no, that it is. That Tmurat Pesach is the same halacha. Fine. Says the Gemara, okay. Eitmar, it was stated, Rabba comes in, he says, Kodom Shchita lo Ashchat Shchita Shaninu. That's actually what we learn, whether it's before Shchita or after Shchita. Rabbi Zera says, Kodom Chatzot lo Chatzot Shaninu. It's not before the Shchita and after the Shchita. It's before Chatzot and after Chatzot, which means the Gorem, which is Kovea, is when did you find the animal? Was it at the beginning of the Zman of Shchitat Pesach, which is Chatzot Yom, or not? So says the Gemara, Rabbi Zera, Ktani Kodom Shchitat Pesach. According to Rabbi Zera, does it say in the Mishnah before the Shchitat Pesach? Right? Eima, you're right. You have to actually add that in. Kodem Zman Shchitat Pesach, before the time of the Shchitat Pesach. So says the Gemara, it's actually Machlokes Tanaim. HaPesach shenimtza Kodem Shchita. A Pesach which is found before doing the Shchita, Yireh, right? You have to actually let it graze and get a blemish. After the Shchita, Yikrav, you're going to bring it on its own. Rabbi Eliezer says no. Kodem Chatzot, if it's going to be before Chatzot, right? Yireh, that's when you're going to do it that way. You're going to bring it the way that it is. After Chatzot, Yikrav, you're going to bring it the way that it is. Okay? Now he comes and he says as follows. Okay? Achar shchitat Pesach yavi lishlamim. After the shchitat Pesach, you're going to bring fresh shlamim. So Amar Rava comes and he says, Lo shanu ela nimtza achar shchita vehemir bo achar shchita. We're talking about that it was found after the shchita, and then you did a tmura, which means a substitute after the shchita. Okay? So one more time. We are talking about, the Yoshua was talking about a Tmunat Pesach, which is going to be brought as a Shamim. We're talking about that the original Korban Pesach was found after the Shchita of the Tmura, of the Machlifa. And Emir Bo Ba'alav Achar Shchitav, which means that in such a case, the original Pesach and also the Tmura was not Nidchu, right? Because since each one of them was not fitting to bring at the time of the Shchita, right? So therefore there's no problem. Aval, Nimtza Kolam Shchita, but if you did find it before the Shchita, and then you made another substitute after the shchita. So now the tmura comes from already something which is pushed off. So since it was already pushed off, so it's not brought, and therefore you don't bring it whatsoever. Okay. So 8 ways. So now we're going to ask the question. Abaye comes and he asks from a braita, Im kesev umakriv korbano. What does it mean that if you're going to bring a sheep? Im kesev lerabot tmunat pesach. Right? What does that mean? We're including a Tmunat Pesach, Achar Pesach, after the regular Korban Pesach, Shekavel Shlamim. What's the case? Ilem, if you're going to tell me now, Nimtza Achar Shchita, that it was done after the Shchita was found, Vehemir Bo, and now you did a Tmura after the Shchita, Shita, obviously. Lama Likar, why do I need a Pasuk? It's just logic. Elalav, but rather you have to say that it's Nimtza before the Shchita, Vehemir Bo Achar Shchita, but they only did the Tmura after the Shchita. So the Braita is actually teaching you that even though the original Korban Pesach was not brought as a shlamim because it was pushed off, the tmura is brought as a shlamim because since it itself was never pushed off, lo gdisha, and only after the shchita, and therefore that's against Rava. So says the Gemara, no. Leolam, really, I'm going to tell you nimtza shchita that if it was found after shchita, ve'mir bo shchita, and you did it after the shchita, so then what happens, right? And that's the case, be'emet, there's no necessity to bring another, right? Another, the tmura is going to be brought. But the pasuk is just an asmachta. Asmachta means it's just like it's like a smach, but it's not 100% that you learn it from the pasuk. Okay. So what do I need this pasuk then? Okay, the Tanyas we learned on a braita. What does it mean kesef? Kesef is l'rabot of the pesach la'aliyah. It's coming to include the korban pesach, the bringing of the pesach for the aliyah, which is brought on the mizbeach with the emurim. So when it says in kesef, right, that you're about the sheep. We're talking about after the first year, Shlamim by Milchamat Pesach, or the Shlamim which comes because of Korban Pesach for all the mitzvot of Shlamim. Shetaun smicha nesachim dunua v'chaz v'shok. All these korbanot they need smicha, the leaning on the animal, nesachim, wine libations, trufat chaz v'shok, waving of the thigh and the breast. So now when it says lim is, right? Why didn't it make a hefsek? Because the is, you don't have to bring the tail on top of the mizbeach for the aliyah, which is the aliyah. You don't have to do that for the is, only for the kesef. But some people they learned it on a reisha. If you found the korban pesach before the slaughtering of it, you're going to wait until they grazes and then you're going to sell it. And then you're going to bring the money as shlamim. The same lacha would apply to the substitute. Rava comes and he says, Lo shanu ela nimtza kol shchita. That's only if you found it before the shchita. Right? You also did a substitute before the shchita. But if you found it before the shchita, but they only did the substitute after the shchita, tmurato kereva, it's going to be brought as a shlamim. My time I was reasoning, ki kava shchita, but when he did the shchita, midid de chazile, it was only going to be fitting for him, which is basically that which we said over here. Midid lo chazile lo kava, but he can't do anything else which is not fixed, which means he cannot do anything which he himself cannot do, but everything else he could. Right? Which is a bema, which is not fitting for a Pesach. Okay? So he says over here, 8 Abaye. So Abaye comes and he asks on the Braita, in Kesev matamuloma. What does it mean then in the words in Kesev? Lerabot tmunat Pesach, achara Pesach, shekreva shlamim. It's coming to include a tmunat Pesach on Pesach of a korban Pesach mekori that it's going to be brought as a korban shlamim. Right? So Yachol, I would have thought to say af lifne Pesach, even before Pesach. Tamulomar comes teach you zevach Pesach. Who karev? Only a kosher Pesach is brought as a shlamim. Ve'en tmunat Pesach karev shlamim, but not the tmunat Pesach is going to be brought as a shlamim. And then obviously we're going to come and we're going to explain Bezat Hashem tomorrow. Have a wonderful day.